What happens when the person who holds your family together simply disappears? When Maya Chen discovered she wasn't invited to her own sister's wedding, she didn't scream or demand explanations. Instead, she bought a one-way ticket to Norway and watched from 3,000 miles away as her sister's perfect day crumbled into chaos. But what came next shocked even her closest friends and left her family begging for forgiveness they might never deserve. You won't believe how this quiet revenge unfolded, so stick around because this story will completely change how you think about family loyalty. I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. I found out while standing in my childhood kitchen, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee and scrolling through Instagram stories. It was a Tuesday morning in July, the kind of Seattle drizzle that made everything look gray through the windows. My phone buzzed with a notification from my cousin Lily, who had posted a boomerang of champagne flutes with the caption "Bridesmaids Brunch for Sophia's Big Day." I stared at the screen. Bridesmaids Brunch. Sophia's big day. My sister Sophia was getting married, and I was finding out through social media like some distant acquaintance. I set my coffee down carefully, the ceramic making a soft click against the granite countertop. The same countertop where Sophia and I had sat countless mornings before school, where I'd helped her with algebra homework and listened to her cry over her first heartbreak. The same kitchen where our mother had told us, after Dad's heart attack 5 years ago, that we needed to take care of each other now. I'd been taking care of Sophia ever since. When she couldn't afford her rent in her trendy Capitol Hill apartment, I quietly transferred money to her account. When she had panic attacks about her marketing job, I stayed on the phone with her until 3 in the morning. When she started dating Dylan Morrison, a smooth-talking real estate agent with perfect teeth and expensive watches, I bit my tongue about my gut feeling that something wasn't right about him. Now she was marrying him, and I wasn't even invited to watch. My phone buzzed again. Another story from my cousin, this time showing a restaurant table full of women I recognized, my aunts, Sophia's college friends, even our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Everyone except me. I called my mother. "Maya, honey." Mom's voice was bright, artificially cheerful in that way she used when she was pretending everything was fine. I could hear the dishwasher running in the background, the familiar sounds of her Tuesday morning routine. "I was just thinking about you. How's the graphic design business?" "Mom," I said, cutting through her small talk, "is Sophia getting married?" The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. "Well," she said finally, and I could hear her moving through the house, probably to the living room where she did her serious conversations. "Yes, sweetheart. Next month, actually. It's going to be very small, very intimate. You know how Sophia is about crowds." Sophia, who had thrown herself a birthday party for 150 people last year. Sophia, who live-streamed her morning coffee routine to thousands of followers. Sophia, who was afraid of crowds. "When exactly?" I asked. "August 15th. It's a Saturday. They're having it at that lovely vineyard in Woodinville. You know the one? Very rustic, very Instagram-worthy." Mom's voice had that distant quality it got when she was describing something she'd seen in a magazine. "Dylan's family has connections there. August 15th. 2 weeks away." 2 weeks, and this was the first I was hearing about it. "Mom," I said slowly, "am I invited?" Another silence. This one longer. 7 seconds. "Oh, Maya, you know how these things get complicated." Sophia really wanted to keep it small, and Dylan's family had so many people they needed to include, and the venue has limited space. She was talking faster now, the words tumbling over each other like water through a broken dam. "We didn't want to put pressure on you anyway, with your work schedule and everything. You're always so busy with your clients." I wasn't busy. I was good at my job, efficient enough that I'd built a successful freelance business that gave me plenty of free time. Mom knew this. "Plus," she continued, "you know how you feel about big social events. Remember cousin Mark's wedding? You left early because of a headache. That was 6 years ago, and the headache was real. But I'd still stayed for the ceremony and the dinner. I'd still brought a gift and smiled for photos and danced with Uncle Robert when he'd had too much champagne. I'm family," I said quietly. Of course you are, sweetheart, and you'll always be family." But Sophia just felt, well, she felt like maybe you wouldn't want to deal with all the wedding drama anyway. "You know how stressed you get." Stressed. That was the word they used now instead of dramatic, which was the word they'd used when I cried at Dad's funeral. When I'd lost my biggest client 2 years ago and called Mom for support, only to be told I was catastrophizing and needed to look on the bright side. The person who held everyone together during family crises wasn't allowed to have her own. I have to go, I said. Maya, please don't be upset. Sophia loves you so much. You know that. Maybe we can all have dinner after they get back from their honeymoon, and you can see all the photos I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that, looking out at the Space Needle in the distance, partially hidden by the morning fog. My coffee had gone completely cold. The rain kept falling against the windows, that persistent Seattle rhythm that usually comforted me. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Norway. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my best friend Zoe, who would have wanted to stage some kind of intervention. Not my neighbor Derek, who usually picked up my mail when I traveled for work. Not my mother or Sophia or anyone else in my family who might have suddenly discovered they needed me for something. I just packed a suitcase, arranged for my plants to be watered, and left. The flight from Seattle to Oslo was long and quiet. I didn't watch movies or read. I just stared out the window at the endless expanse of ocean and ice, thinking about how distance looked from 35,000 feet. Everything small and manageable and far away. I'd chosen Norway partly because it was as far from Washington state as I could get without leaving the same time zone as home entirely, and partly because I'd always wanted to see the fjords. But mostly, I'd chosen it because it was beautiful and remote and completely disconnected from anything that reminded me of family obligations. The Airbnb I'd rented was a small wooden cabin about an hour outside Bergen, perched on the edge of a fjord that looked like something from a fairy tale. The water was so blue it almost hurt to look at, surrounded by mountains that disappeared into low-hanging clouds. Inside, everything was simple and clean: white walls, pale wood furniture, windows that framed the landscape like paintings. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I spent the first day just walking. There were hiking trails that wound through forests of pine and birch, past waterfalls that tumbled down from heights I couldn't see. I took photos with my phone, not for social media but just for myself, the way the light fell through the trees, the pattern of stones at the bottom of a stream, the view from a wooden bridge that crossed a valley filled with wildflowers. That evening, I posted a single photo to Instagram, the view from my cabin's front porch, all blue water and green mountains under an enormous sky. No caption, no location tag, just the image. Within minutes, the likes and comments started rolling in. Sophia's friends, my cousins, even my mother. No one said anything direct, but I could feel the curiosity, the questions they weren't asking. The next day, I hiked to a viewpoint that overlooked 3 different fjords. The trail was steep and challenging, and by the time I reached the top, I was exhausted and exhilarated and completely alone. I sat on a rocky outcrop for an hour, just listening to the wind and watching clouds move across the landscape like slow-motion waves. I posted another photo, my hiking boots propped up on a rock, the vast landscape spreading out beyond them. Again, no words, just the image. The response was immediate and growing more urgent. My phone buzzed with Instagram notifications, text messages, missed calls, but I didn't check them. I was learning something about the power of silence, about how being unreachable could speak louder than any words. August 15th arrived gray and misty. I woke up in my Norwegian cabin and realized it was Sophia's wedding day, 7 hours ahead of Seattle time, which meant the ceremony would happen in my afternoon, their morning. I made coffee and sat on the front porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket I'd found in the cabin's closet. The fjord was perfectly still, reflecting the mountains and sky like a mirror. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear church bells from a village I couldn't see. I thought about Sophia getting ready, probably surrounded by her bridesmaids in some hotel suite, everyone laughing and taking photos and sharing mimosas. I thought about my mother fussing with flower arrangements and making sure the photographer captured every moment. I thought about Dylan, straightening his tie and shaking hands with his groomsmen, and I thought about the empty space where I should have been. Not because I needed to be the center of attention, but because I had loved Sophia longer than anyone else in that room. Because I had been the one to hold her when she had nightmares as a child, to teach her how to drive, to help her move into her first apartment. Because I had been her sister for 26 years, and that should have mattered. Around noon my time, I posted a photo of my hands wrapped around my coffee mug, the fjord stretching out behind them. The light was soft and peaceful, everything painted in shades of blue and gray and white. I didn't need to say where I was or what day it was. The Timestamp would tell them everything. The responses came immediately, but different this time. More frantic. Direct messages from cousins, voicemails from my mother, even a missed call from Sophia herself. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I went for a walk along the water's edge. I found a small wooden dock that jutted out into the fjord and sat there for the rest of the afternoon, watching the light change as the hours passed. Occasionally, a fishing boat would pass in the distance, but otherwise, I was completely alone with the mountains and the water and the enormous sky. I wondered if they had noticed my posts yet, if they had put together the dates and the distance and realized what I was doing, if they understood that this wasn't anger or revenge, but something quieter and more final. I was showing them what absence looked like that evening as the sun set behind the mountains, turning everything golden and pink. I posted one more photo. It was taken from the dock, looking out over the water toward the horizon. The image was peaceful and beautiful and completely empty of people. The caption was simple: some distances are necessary. Then I turned off my phone. I woke up the next morning to the sound of rain on the cabin's roof. It was a gentle, steady sound that made me want to stay in bed all day. But when I finally got up and made coffee and turned on my phone to check the weather, I found myself in the middle of a digital storm. 47 missed calls, over 100 text messages, dozens of Instagram notifications, voicemails that filled up my inbox and started deleting themselves to make room for more. The most recent text was from my mother, sent at a Seattle time. Maya, please call me. Something terrible happened at the wedding. Sophia needs you. My stomach dropped. Despite everything, Sophia was still my sister. If something had happened to her, if she was hurt, I scrolled through the messages quickly, looking for details. Most were just variations of "call me" and "where are you" and "Sophia needs you." But then I found one from Zoe, my best friend, who always told me the truth without sugarcoating it. I'm sure you've heard by now, but if you haven't, Dylan was arrested at the wedding. Gambling debts, apparently. His creditors showed up during the reception and made a scene. Sophia's devastated. Your family is freaking out because you're not answering your phone and they need you to come fix everything. Again, I stared at the message for a long time. Dylan arrested. Gambling debts. Everything I'd suspected about him but never voiced because it wasn't my place to judge Sophia's choices. My phone rang in my hands. Mom's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something about the timing, the desperation in all those messages, made me swipe to accept the call. Maya. Mom's voice was raw, like she'd been crying or shouting or both. Oh, thank God. Where are you? We need you to come home right now. Sophia is. She's not doing well. What happened? I asked, though I already knew. It was awful, Maya. Just awful. Dylan. We found out he owes money to some very dangerous people. A lot of money. They showed up at the reception, in front of everyone. There was shouting, and they took Dylan away in handcuffs, and Sophia she collapsed. She hasn't spoken to anyone since yesterday. She won't eat. She won't come out of her room. I could hear the exhaustion in Mom's voice, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from trying to hold everything together when everything is falling apart. Where are you? She asked again. Please tell me you're coming home. I looked out the window of my cabin. The rain was still falling softly, and the fjord was calm and gray, disappearing into the mist. It was the most peaceful place I'd ever been. I'm in Norway, I said. Norway? Maya. Why on earth are you in Norway? This is not the time for a vacation. Your sister needs you. We all need you. You're the strong one, the one who always knows what to do. The strong one. There it was again, that label they'd given me after Dad died. The one that meant I was supposed to be everyone's foundation while never needing foundation myself. I'm in Norway, I repeated, because I wasn't invited to Sophia's wedding. Because none of you thought I was important enough to include in her most important day. Because you decided I was too busy or too stressed or too dramatic to be part of our family. Maya, that's not. But now that everything's gone wrong, now that Sophia's perfect wedding has turned into a nightmare, suddenly you need me. Suddenly I'm important enough to call. Mom was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. Please, she whispered. I know we made mistakes. I know we hurt you. But Sophia is falling apart, and I don't know how to help her. She keeps asking. For you. She kept asking for me, I said. Or she's asking for me now because she needs something. Both, Mom admitted. Maya, I'm sorry. We're all sorry. We should have invited you. We should have included you. Sophia knows that now. But please, can we talk about this when you come home? She needs her big sister. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I could see Sophia as a little girl, 6 years old with pigtails and scraped knees, running to me for comfort after falling off her bike. I could see her at 16, crying in my room after her first heartbreak, asking me how to stop hurting so much. I could see her at 22, calling me from her college dorm in the middle of the night because she was having a panic attack and didn't know who else to call. She had always come to me when things fell apart, but she'd never thought to include me when things were good. Maya, Mom's voice was small. Please, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but she needs you. I opened my eyes and looked out at the fjord again. A fishing boat was making its way slowly across the water, leaving a small wake that spread out behind it in a perfect V. The mountains stood silent and eternal, unchanged by human drama. I'll think about it, I said finally. Thank you. Oh, Maya, thank you. When can you be home? I can book you a flight right now. I said I'll think about it, Mom. Not that I'll do it. The silence that followed was different from the others. This time, it was filled with understanding, with the recognition that something fundamental had shifted, that I was no longer the person who automatically said yes to every family crisis. I love you, sweetheart, Mom said finally. I love you too, I said. But love isn't enough anymore. It never was. After I hung up, I sat on the front porch for hours, watching the rain fall into the fjord. My phone kept buzzing with new messages, but I didn't check them. Instead, I thought about patterns, about the roles people play in families, about the difference between being needed and being valued. By evening, I had made my decision. I recorded a voice message and sent it to my mother, Sophia, and Zoe simultaneously. I'm staying in Norway for another week. Sophia, I'm sorry that Dylan hurt you, and I'm sorry your wedding day was ruined, but I'm not sorry that I wasn't there to fix it. For 26 years, I've been the person everyone turns to when things go wrong, but never the person anyone thinks to include when things go right. I've been your emergency contact, your emotional support system, your backup plan, but I've never been your equal, your priority, or your first choice. I need you all to sit with that for a while. I need you to figure out how to handle a crisis without automatically expecting me to drop everything and save you. And I need to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly taking care of everyone else. I'll be home next Sunday. We can talk then, if you want to, but things are going to be different. I'm going to be different. And if you can't accept that, then maybe the distance between us isn't just geographical. Then I turned off my phone again and went inside to make dinner. The next few days passed quietly. I hiked longer trails, discovered a small village with a bakery that made the most incredible cardamom rolls, and spent hours reading books I'd brought but hadn't touched since arriving. I also started sketching again, something I hadn't done since college. The landscape was so beautiful it demanded to be captured, and I found myself filling a notebook with drawings of mountains and water and sky. On my last night in the cabin, I built a fire in the stone fireplace and sat watching the flames while the fjord turned silver under moonlight. I felt different than when I'd arrived, calmer, clearer, more certain of who I was and what I deserved. I also felt sad, but it was a clean sadness, like the grief you feel when something that's been dying for a long time finally ends. The flight home felt shorter than the flight away had. Maybe because I knew what I was returning to now, or maybe because I was no longer running from anything. Zoe picked me up at the airport. She hugged me hard and didn't ask any questions during the drive to my apartment, just told me about her week and let me readjust to the familiar rhythms of Seattle traffic and conversation. Your family's been calling me, she said as we pulled into my parking spot. I told them I didn't know when you'd be back. Thank you. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Sophia needed to face some consequences for once, and your mom needed to realize that you're not just the family's unpaid therapist. I looked up at my apartment building, at the windows of the home I'd made for myself, separate from all the obligations and expectations that had defined me for so long. I don't know if they'll understand, I said. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, Zoe replied. But you'll understand, and that's what matters. That evening, I turned my phone back on for the first time in days. The messages had slowed down, but there were still a few new ones. Most were from family members asking when I'd be home, but one was from Sophia herself, sent that morning. Maya, I know you're angry with me, and I know I messed up. Not just with the wedding, but with everything. With taking you for granted and not appreciating everything you've done for me over the years. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. I love you, and I miss you. Your sister. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was acknowledgement. It was a start. I looked around my apartment at my design workspace, at the plants that had survived my absence, at the life I'd built independently of anyone else's needs or crises. Then I sat down and wrote a text back. Sophia, thank you for saying that. I miss you too. But missing someone and taking them for granted aren't opposites, they can happen at the same time. I love you, but I can't go back to being the person who fixes everyone's problems while never having her own needs met. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it has to be as equals, not as the person who saves you and the person who needs saving. We can start there, if you're willing. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Her response came within minutes. Yes, I want to try. Can we have coffee this week? Just the two of us? Friday afternoon. I typed back. That little place on Pine Street, 2 o'clock. I'll be there. I set my phone aside and looked out my window toward the sound, where ferries were crossing back and forth under the evening light. Tomorrow, I would go back to my work, to my clients, to my life. But it would be different now, because I was different. I had learned something important in those mountains and fjords, that love without respect is just another kind of burden. That being needed isn't the same as being valued. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be taken for granted. And I had learned that I was strong enough to be alone, which meant I was strong enough to demand better when I chose not to be. 3 months later, Sophia and I were still rebuilding our relationship, slowly and carefully. She was in therapy, dealing not just with Dylan's betrayal but with her own patterns of depending on others to solve her problems. Mom had started actually asking about my life instead of just assuming I was fine. And I had started saying no to requests that felt more like demands. It wasn't perfect, and some family members still didn't understand why I'd abandoned everyone during a crisis. But I'd stopped caring whether people understood my boundaries. I only cared that they respected them. The photos from my week in Norway were still on my phone, hundreds of images of mountains and water and sky. Sometimes I scrolled through them when I needed to remember what peace felt like, what it meant to be somewhere beautiful and alone and completely free of other people's expectations. But mostly, I didn't need the photos anymore. I had learned to carry that peace with me, to find those mountains inside myself whenever the world got too loud or demanding or full of people who confused love with obligation. I had learned that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply disappear until people realize they can't take you for granted anymore. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they actually learn to appreciate what they almost lost. But if they don't, that's okay too. Because you've already learned the most important lesson of all, that your worth doesn't depend on how much other people need you. It depends on how much you need yourself. And I finally needed myself enough to never disappear again.